Welcome back to the 1 Hour Guide by Anil Nathu. We're diving deep into Adam Grant's Give and Take today.
It's a fantastic book, really a game changer, especially when it comes to thinking about business.
Yeah, we all know generosity is important,
Yeah.
but this book really makes the case that it can actually drive success.
It's not just feel-good stuff, though. Grant backs up his claims with solid research, real-world examples, really breaks it down.
Exactly. He shows how different approaches to reciprocity can play out in networking, in teamwork, leadership, all of it.
He actually categorizes these approaches as giver, taker, and matcher styles.
Okay, so let's unpack these styles a little bit. I have a feeling most of us have met all three types out there in the wild, right?
Absolutely. You've got your givers, always putting others first, prioritizing helping out, even if it means they don't get an immediate return.
Right, always adding value.
And then you have your takers, I think the name speaks for itself, focused on their own gain, even if it means stepping on others to get ahead.
Sounds familiar.
And then there are the matchers, the fair play folks. They operate on a you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours kind of principle.
Okay, that makes sense. So how do these styles connect to success? Is one style inherently better than the others?
That's where things get interesting. Grant's research actually shows that givers are more likely to reach both the top and the bottom of the success ladder.
Whoa, wait a minute. So givers can be both the most and the least successful. How does that even work?
It all comes down to strategy and boundaries, which the 1 Hour Guide by Anil Nathu really dives into.
Oh, interesting. So givers have to be smart about it.
Exactly. The givers who thrive are those who set those clear boundaries, prioritize their own well-being, while those who overextend themselves constantly, well, they risk burning out.
That makes sense. It's like that saying, you can't pour from an empty cup.
Exactly. So the question becomes, how do givers avoid falling into that trap? How do they actually become those high achievers?
That's the million-dollar question.
Well, one key area Grant explores is networking. And he has this really cool analogy talking about peacocks and pandas to illustrate different styles.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. Tell me more about these peacocks and pandas.
So think about your takers. They're like the peacocks of the networking world, all about flash, self-promotion. They're trying to impress everyone, grab all the attention.
Makes sense.
But your givers, they're like pandas. They're quieter, more focused on building genuine connections.
So it's not about being the loudest person in the room or having the most impressive business card.
Not at all. Grant's research actually shows that givers build stronger, more resilient networks because they prioritize those authentic relationships, and they also understand the power of weak ties.
Weak ties. Now, I've heard that term before, but can you explain what it means in this context?
Sure, weak ties are those more casual connections that takers often overlook. You know, someone you briefly chatted with at a conference, connected with on LinkedIn, that sort of thing.
I see.
And givers recognize that those connections can actually open doors to unexpected opportunities.
So it's about expanding your network beyond your immediate circle, being open to connecting with people from diverse backgrounds and industries.
Exactly. And that approach aligns perfectly with the whole giver mindset, adding value and creating that ripple effect of generosity.
So givers excel at networking, but what about collaboration? How does that giver style play out when you're working in a team setting?
Well, that's where the giver advantage really shines. Think about it. Who do you want to work with? Someone who hogs the spotlight or someone who makes sure everyone gets their due?
Definitely someone who shares the credit, fosters that collaborative environment.
Exactly. And givers build that trust and inspire collaboration because they genuinely want everyone to succeed. And get this, Grant's research shows that givers actually gain more respect and influence when they share credit.
That's amazing. So it's not a zero-sum game where someone has to lose for someone else to win.
Absolutely. It's about creating that win-win situation. And that principle applies to leadership, too. Grant argues that givers are often more effective leaders because they're better at recognizing potential in others, even in people who haven't made it yet.
It's like they see the diamond in the rough.
Exactly. Takers tend to focus on those who are already successful. They might miss those hidden gems because they're not looking beyond the surface.
So givers are not only good at networking and collaboration, but they're also great at spotting and nurturing talent, which is huge for any leader.
Absolutely. And they do all of this while practicing powerless communication, which is one of the most fascinating concepts in the book.
Powerless communication. Okay, you're going to have to explain that one. What does that even mean?
It means being modest, being vulnerable, authentic in your communication. Think about leaders like Abraham Lincoln, known for their humility, their willingness to seek counsel from others.
So you're telling me I don't need to act like I have all the answers all the time. The vulnerability can actually be a strength.
That's exactly what Grant's research shows. Powerless communication builds trust because it shows you're human, you're willing to learn and grow. It's not about being weak, it's about being genuine and approachable.
Wow, that's really making me rethink my own communication style. I can see how being more open and vulnerable could help me build stronger relationships, even become more persuasive.
It's a powerful concept, and the 1 Hour Guide by Anil Nathu does a great job of breaking it down and showing you how to apply it.
I'm definitely going to have to try this out. But there's one big question that keeps coming up for me. If givers are so focused on helping others, how do they avoid burnout? It seems like they'd be at high risk.
You're absolutely right. Burnout is a real danger for givers if they don't protect their energy and set boundaries. Luckily, Grant provides some really practical strategies for avoiding this trap.
Okay, good. I'm all ears. What are some of those strategies?
One key strategy is what he calls chunking your giving. Instead of spreading yourself too thin, trying to help everyone with everything, you focus on fewer, more meaningful projects.
So it's about being strategic with your giving, choosing your battles wisely.
Exactly. Another important point is that successful givers understand they need to receive as well as give. It's about finding that balance, that reciprocity.
Makes sense. It's like that oxygen mask analogy on airplanes.
Yeah,
You have to put your own mask on first before you can help others. So givers need to prioritize their own well-being, make sure their own needs are met.
exactly. And that actually leads into another important concept that Grant explores, the doormat effect.
Oh yeah, the doormat effect. I've heard of that.
Yeah.
That's when well-intentioned givers end up getting taken advantage of, right?
Exactly. It's about learning to say no, setting clear boundaries, and not letting takers drain you dry. Grant offers some really actionable tips in this area, for example, setting a time limit for how long you're willing to help someone, or creating a system for prioritizing requests.
So it's about being generous without being a pushover.
Precisely. Successful givers find that sweet spot between giving and protecting themselves.
This is also insightful, but what about matchers? Where do they fit into all of this?
Matchers are fascinating because they represent that balance between giving and taking. They believe in fairness and reciprocity. But here's the thing. Grant explores how even matchers can shift their reciprocity style.
Wait, really? You're telling me these styles aren't set in stone?
That's right. He calls it the Scrooge shift.
Okay, Scrooge shift. I need to hear more about this. Tell me everything.
Well, it's the idea that people can actually change their reciprocity styles based on life experiences, role models, or even just realizing that a different approach might be more beneficial in the long run.
So a hardcore taker could actually become a giver, or a matcher could become more generous. That's incredibly encouraging.
That's exactly the point Grant is making. It's not about labeling people or putting them in boxes. It's about understanding that we all have the capacity for change and growth.
This is making me think about my own interactions and how I could be more intentional about fostering a giver culture in my own workplace.
It's all about creating that ripple effect of generosity, which is what give and take is all about. And the 1 Hour Guide by Anil Nathu does a fantastic job of distilling these insights and giving you a framework for applying them.
This has been so eye-opening. It's definitely going to change how I approach my career and relationships. But before we move on, I'm curious to hear more about this Scrooge shift and how it actually plays out in real life.
Yeah, let's dive into that next. It's a fascinating concept with some really inspiring examples. So the Scrooge shift, it's not like some overnight transformation. It's often triggered by specific experiences, things that really challenge our assumptions about success.
Like a real aha moment, someone realizing their old way of operating just isn't working anymore.
Yeah, exactly. It could be a career setback that forces a taker to reassess or seeing the positive impact of a giver role model.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's just a gradual realization, that giving is more fulfilling in the long run, more sustainable for success.
It reminds me of that quote, success is not final, failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. Those who can shift, they're the ones open to learning, adapting.
Absolutely, that resilience, that willingness to learn and grow, it's key to this whole concept.
Yeah, and it's not about being a giver in every single situation, right?
That's right. There are times when a more assertive approach might be necessary, like a taker approach, to protect your interests.
Makes sense.
Sometimes a matcher approach is perfectly appropriate, ensuring fairness and balance. The key is self-awareness, being strategic.
Having that toolkit of reciprocity styles and knowing which tool to use when.
That's a great way to put it. And this brings us to another important point. Grant doesn't just say be a giver. He actually provides tools and strategies.
That's what I love about this book. It's not just theoretical, it's full of actionable advice. What are some of the practical tips that stand out to you?
One of my favorites is the 5-minute favor. Such a simple but powerful idea. The idea is to ask yourself, what small act of kindness can I do today that takes less than 5 minutes?
I love that. Makes it seem so attainable.
Right. It's not about grand gestures. It's about those everyday acts that can brighten someone's day.
Strengthen relationships.
Exactly. Could be a thank you note, an introduction for a colleague, offering to help with a small task. These small acts create a ripple effect, a culture of generosity.
Like planting seeds of kindness that can grow into something much bigger.
Beautiful analogy. Another key takeaway, and the 1 Hour Guide by Anil Nathu really hits on this, is building your network through giving.
So it's not just about collecting business cards at events. It's about genuinely connecting, offering support.
Precisely. It's about being a connector, making introductions, sharing information, offering expertise, without expecting anything back.
Shifting your focus from what can I get to what can I give.
Right. And when you approach networking with that giver mindset, you build stronger, more authentic relationships.
This is making me realize how much I've underestimated the power of giving. It's not just about being nice, it's a strategic advantage.
That's the beauty of Grant's work. He shows us that generosity is not just good for the soul, it's good for the bottom line.
Okay, we've covered a lot here. The different reciprocity styles, the Scrooge shift, the importance of boundaries, practical tips for giving. I feel like we're just scratching the surface, though. What are some other key insights from the 1 Hour Guide by Anil Nathu that listeners should know?
Well, one of the most important points is that understanding your own reciprocity style is crucial.
Figuring out if you're naturally a giver, a taker, or a matcher?
Exactly. Once you understand your tendencies, you can play to your strengths, work on your weaknesses. If you're a giver, maybe you need to focus on boundaries, avoiding burnout.
And if you tend to be more of a taker, maybe you need to work on being more collaborative, generous.
Right. And for matchers, it's about finding that balance between fairness and strategic giving. The key is self-awareness and being intentional.
It's about making conscious choices that align with your values.
Exactly. And Give and Take offers a framework for doing just that. It's not one size fits all. It's a set of principles and strategies you can adapt.
This has been such an insightful deep dive. I have a whole new perspective on how to approach my career and relationships.
That's fantastic to hear. And remember, this is just a taste of what Give and Take has to offer.
And for a concise overview, the 1 Hour Guide by Anil Nathu is excellent. It distills the essence of the book, makes it more accessible.
Absolutely. A great way to grasp the core concepts and start applying them.
Now, before we wrap up, I wanted to touch on one more takeaway that really resonated with me. Success isn't just about what we achieve for ourselves, but also about how we contribute to the success of others.
That's such a powerful point. It's about creating that ripple effect of generosity that goes beyond ourselves.
It's about leaving a legacy of kindness and impact.
Exactly. And that brings us to an important question for you, the listener. What's your biggest takeaway from today? What resonated with you?
What will you do with this knowledge? What small act of kindness will you put into action today? It's amazing how much a book can shift your thinking. I'm already thinking about how I could be more intentional with giving in my own work.
It's the power of ideas, right? And the 1 Hour Guide by Anil Nathu really helps bring those ideas from give and take to life, makes them more actionable.
Yeah, it's not just about reading. It's about actually changing your mindset and then putting it into practice.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people might be surprised to learn that generosity can actually be a strategic advantage in business.
It kind of goes against that whole dog-eat-dog mentality, doesn't it? But the research Grant presents is pretty compelling. When you focus on adding value to others, helping them succeed, it ultimately comes back to benefit you too.
It's like that saying, a rising tide lifts all boats.
Love that analogy. And it's not just about individual success either. It's about creating a more collaborative culture in our workplaces and communities.
So it's not just about individual success, it's about collective success.
Exactly. That's something that really resonates with me. We're all interconnected. And when we help each other rise, we all benefit.
Creating a virtuous cycle of generosity and success. And that brings us back to that question for our listeners. What small act of kindness will you put into action today?
It doesn't have to be anything big. It could be offering a word of encouragement to a colleague or sharing a helpful resource or just listening with empathy.
Those small acts can make a big difference. And as we wrap up this deep dive into give and take, I want to encourage everyone listening to embrace the power of giving.
It's not about being a pushover or letting people walk all over you. It's about being strategic and intentional with your generosity.
It's about setting boundaries, protecting your well-being, and understanding that true giving is about empowering others to succeed.
And remember, it's a journey. We all have the capacity to become more effective givers, even if we haven't always gotten it right in the past.
It's about being open to learning and growing. And give and take, along with those insights from the 1-Hour Guide by Anil Nathu, gives us the tools and the inspiration to do just that.
So go out there and be a giver, make a difference, and just see how that generosity comes back around to you in ways you might never have imagined.
Thank you for joining us today. Visit the 1-Hour Guide website for more business insights by Anil Nathu.